My name is Yuan, and I used to be an economics student. So how many of you are currently economics students? Just give me a wave. And how many of you are social science students or policy students? Okay, a bit more. So I work for an organisation called Rethinking Economics. We are a network of local groups across universities across the world, and here are some of the local groups on our map. And the reason that we work together is to try to transform and expand the economics curriculum. In this talk, I'll tell you why we want to do that. There might be one question in your minds right now, which is, frankly, what is an economist anyway? So I did my undergraduate degree in philosophy and economics. I did a master's degree in economics. I've worked for 3 different economics research institutions, and yet I sometimes hesitate when people ask me what I am. I'm not sure that I identify as being an economist. Now, there are many reasons for this, one of which I'll explore. In our recent schools workshops, we've been going to 6 forms across the country and talking to 16 to 18-year-olds about economics and trying to expand their vision of what economics involves. And as part of these workshops, we ask students, draw us a picture of an economist and draw what they do. And we get some beautiful pictures. This little guy is clearly having a great time. He is literally standing on top of the world in his very beautiful business suit and top hat. And if you can look closely, you can see that he actually has dollar signs in his eyes. This dude is at a desk somewhere, but he's still quite trendy. He has got the top hat even if he's sitting down at his own desk and he's doing something with some papers. He looks quite concerned, probably because he's thinking about the state of the world. This guy is also wearing a business suit, no surprise. He's got a nice dark tie on. He's at least smiling, perhaps because he's holding a copy of the Financial Times. And finally, one student gave us 2 different pictures. The one on the right is a student, as you can see. The student, the smile is kind of hesitant, a little bit smaller, a nice top hat, but a little bit of a messy hairstyle. And the worker, as in like the professional economist, on the left here has acquired a monocle, which is something that they give you when you graduate from the London School of Economics. And he is a lot bigger, as you can see. He's grown throughout his learnings. So where this leaves us is the question, if you are not a white, tall, privileged man in a business suit with a monocle and a top hat, then can you be an economist? And if not, then where does that leave the rest of us? And I think this question is important because economists have a great deal of power in our society. Who controls our economic narrative? Now, the answer is sometimes politicians, sometimes people who write in the media, but a lot of the time, economists and the economic narratives and ideologies that they propound. If you think about current issues in the UK, what do you think are the major election issues that will determine our elections in May? There are things like austerity, cuts to benefits, and government spending. Now, there are those issues not because those are the issues that necessarily might be the most important in any democracy, but because those are the issues that have been put on the agenda using the terminology of economics by politicians and economists. And the ability to frame the agenda and shape the agenda is a huge source of discursive power in any society. And this is why Joan Robinson, who was a very prominent economist at Cambridge through the middle of the last century, said that she studies economics not in order to acquire a set of ready-made answers to questions that economists have already solved, but in order not to be fooled by economists who call themselves experts. And I think that's something that we would do well to bear in mind. So this is the first reason why we are rethinking economics. It is because unchallenged power is dangerous. Now, you might be wondering what kind of power do economists have and in what way is it unchallenged? Now, this is where the idea of a frame is very helpful. This is a physical frame. It frames a picture. Now, if you go to an art gallery, you know where to look. Why do you know where to look? Because all the pictures are in frames. You don't look at the ceiling or at the floor or in the corners. The frames direct your gaze, your vision, to the pictures that the exhibition is showcasing and says, look, this is important. We surrounded it with gold. It's really ornate. This is important. You should be looking here. And similarly, economists and economic ideologies have the ability to shape your vision of what is important, to direct your attention to different parts of otherwise very complex, very rich picture that is our economy. I'll give you 2 examples of 2 headlines. Firstly, this is a Daily Telegraph headline telling us that David Cameron pledges to cut immigration, but the pledge is in tatters. Now, what kinds of values and responses did that wording ignite in you? It probably lets you realize that immigration is a bad thing, it's in tatters, and this policy is going really badly. And it doesn't do that by saying explicitly immigration is a bad thing. It does that through the use of language that it uses. So if you pledge to do something, usually that means the thing you're doing is really important. You wouldn't get up on a stage and say, I promise X, if X was kind of really boring. You'd only do that if X was really important and also good. This is a different headline from the same newspaper, which actually goes completely the other way. It's saying, here's why David Cameron should be pleased that there is more immigration. So it doesn't explicitly say immigration good or immigration bad. It gives you a set of ideas and frames to situate that whole debate. And what economists do when we use economic language is verge on framing the issues that are important and also verge on identifying what issues we think are morally important. So welfare economists talk about optimal taxation. Environmental economists talk about the optimal level of pollution. Economists often talk about surplus or deficit. We talk about Pareto efficiency. We talk about welfare. We talk about benefit. And all those words carry very strong moral implications. And it's very important to challenge, therefore, the moral implications of our economics. Now, this textbook, which I would recommend to all of you, was given to me by one of my undergraduate tutors who awakened, I guess, a revelation in me. I was talking to him about economics, and I said, his name is James Ford, and I said, James, I don't understand, how can economists start to predict the world better? How can we start to become like physicists? And he said, Yuan, maybe you're asking the wrong question. Maybe economists don't need to predict the world like physicists. Maybe we need to understand it better like poets. And my mind was completely blown, and he gave me this textbook. Now this is the anti-economics, the anti-textbook for economics. And the two authors of it, Myatt and Hill, said that they wrote it in order to, quote, defend students against the unconscious acceptance of ideology. Now they're not saying what ideology students should believe, and that's very important when it comes to rethinking economics and our organisation. They're just saying that you should be cautious about the unconscious acceptance of theories and values and frames that you have not questioned because they are the only theories that are being propounded to you in your education. The second reason that we're rethinking economics is because there's more out there. There is a whole world of theories that is not encapsulated in our undergraduate or postgraduate syllabuses, and that in turn deprives us as students and the society around us of different ways of formulating economic policy, different ways of asking questions about the economy, and different responses to the economic crises that we currently face. Now, Shakespeare wrote in his play Hamlet, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. And I think this is a very pertinent quote to the state of academic economics as it is right now. We have not only the mainstream neoclassical economics, which has been propounded in our textbooks, the economics of 18th century mathematics and 21st century economics, but there is a whole diversity of economics and economists that sadly the mainstream academy has forgotten. There are institutional economists, there are Keynesian economists, there are Marxian economists, feminist economists, ecological economists, and all those different schools of economics frame the economy in a different way. They ask different questions about the economy, and they have different ontology. Ontology means set of things that you believe exist. So neoclassical economists concentrate very much on individuals or representative agents and the optimization problems of those highly rational, highly calculating individuals. Marxist economists and classical economists will concentrate more on groups of people within society, such as classes and such as trades of people within society, people who do the same kind of work in the same kind of organizations. Feminist economists will concentrate on households and the dynamics within the household and also the reproduction of social care. So you see all these different schools have different ontologies, and that means they have different conclusions a lot of the time and different frames. So this is why we call ourselves a pluralist movement. Pluralism means being open to multiple schools of thought, multiple methods of investigating the world, and multiple perspectives. And this book, written by one of our most prominent speakers, Ha-Joon Chang at the University of Cambridge, is a really good guide to some schools of economics. It's called Economics, the User's Guide, if you want to just dip into that. Now, the third reason why we're rethinking economics is because economists get it wrong. You've probably realized this, being alive in 2015. There have been so many crises and so many problems that have fermented over the last few decades that economists have really missed when it comes to our mainstream education and mainstream debate, whether it's inequality, environmental crisis, racial and gender discrimination, or also financial crisis. Now, just over a decade ago, when Nobel Prize laureate Robert Lucas said, the central problem of depression prevention has been solved. And in fact, in the American Economic Association conference that year, it was kind of just like a kind of happy festival of how right we are. Look at ourselves, we've done all this work, we've solved all the problems, inflation is moderate, growth is moderate, we've got it all down. Well, whoops. This is a protest in Madrid a few years ago at the austerity cuts that were implemented by the government in response to the financial crisis and the huge problems of budget balancing that gave the Spanish government, and also at the way that the setup of the Eurozone monetary union had tied the hands of the Spanish government to really react in any meaningful way. And there are millions of people on the streets in the last 10 years who have been protesting economic crises, and yet we do not see millions of papers being written in response to these crises. And what's more important, actually, we don't see the millions of students who pass through undergraduate educations get a taste of why these crises are really important. So the last reason that we're rethinking economics is because we don't have the best tools to handle reality. We do have a set of tools. So when I was 18 and started my undergraduate degree at Oxford University, I got this nice toolkit. They told me how to use those tools, and they told me how to use those tools to solve neoclassical problems, and that was very exciting. But then I asked them, well, this toolkit is actually not that useful for solving all the problems I want to see, and in fact I don't think it's very relevant to solving the problems I want to deal with, so what do I do next? And they said, oh, wait until you get your master's degree, wait until you get your PhD degree, wait until you've become a postdoc, wait until you're a tenured academic. And frankly, that makes academic economics sound a bit like a Ponzi scheme. We're just kind of constantly waiting for the next payoff that will hopefully come, and which, frankly, I have not yet seen. Now, the issue is not that neoclassical economics is useless. It's that there are lots of different schools of economics and lots of different toolkits that could be as useful or more useful. And economists like talking about diminishing marginal returns, i.e., you might want one slice of chocolate cake now, but if you have 10 slices, you'll probably stop wanting them as much. And I feel very much the same about studying one school of thought within economics. We've had a lot of neoclassical toolkit using, and we have not really expanded our minds to involve other schools of economics and the often very high impact of insights they can give us. I'm going to illustrate this by giving some examples of problem sets and examination questions that I had to do over the last 5 years of my education, which many of you in the audience might be able to recognize. And this kind of illustrates how economics in the academy has become decoupled from reality. So this is a first-year undergraduate exam at Oxford University. The economy of Stableland is characterized by the following equations, blah, 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 blah. Derive the ISLM curves. This is part A. And then there's a huge debate in academic economics as to whether deriving these curves is actually helpful for anybody, let alone 18-year-olds who've just gone to university to study the economy. Then you have to suppose that. And before I just show you what we're meant to suppose, let me highlight that most economics problems are framed in the phrasing, suppose that, and then what happens? Or assume that, and then what happens? Or if, then what happens? And it was once said of the Chicago economist, Nobel Prize-winning economist Gary Becker, that if you wanted to win an argument with Gary Becker, all you had to do is wait for Gary to say the words, let's assume that, and then you had to say, no, let's not. And that was how you got past a debate with an economist. Try it, it really does work. So part 2 of this question is you're meant to suppose that this stuff, and then the next part is that you suppose that this stuff, this other stuff. And finally, the question asks you in the last part of a 4-part examination question, comment briefly on the realism of the model and the implications for policy making. And frankly, you're not equipped to do that because your tutors and your textbook and your lecturers do not prepare you to say anything meaningful about the economy outside of your classroom if you study properly. Now, if you study improperly and you start reading financial news and economic news, then maybe you'll be able to do that. But as an undergraduate, your incentives are to get your head down and study properly the textbook. And let me just remind you that although this question asks you to comment briefly on the realism of the model, the question does state that this is the economy of Stableland, which is probably not where we live right now. So at this point, my tutor said to me, first-year economics might be a bit abstract and a bit inapplicable, but these tools will be helpful in the long run. Why don't you wait till you get to your second year or your third year? And in my second year, I was also told that these were the kinds of problems we were meant to do. This is a microeconomics problem set for my second year at Oxford. It's a common resource problem. On an island, there are 2 lakes and 16 fishermen. Now, are there any geography students in the background who can actually just tell me which island that describes, or if this place actually exists? It sounds very poignant and beautiful. Each fisherman can fish, blah, 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 and as soon as we get to the first abstraction, you can already start to tell where this is going to take you. And it's not that this is a common good problem in economics, which is an interesting way of modelling the world, but it's only interesting for perhaps the first few weeks and not for the first 5 years. I went to the LSE to do my MSc in economics there. We were told to assume a small open economy inhabited by a representative agent with infinite horizon. So in English, what that means is assume a small economy that is trading with other economies, that it's inhabited by either one person or a number of people who all act exactly the same as one person, so perhaps a kind of army of Daleks. And those people have infinite horizon, as in they live forever, and then you derive all these things. So I think this kind of shows how, if these tools are applicable to the real world, we are not shown how they are applicable. And if they're not applicable to the real world, which is a big debate and which has many speakers on each side of it within the academic profession, then we're even in an even worse situation because we're not sure why we're studying this at all. So the conclusion from that is the real world is out there, and the world has changed, but the syllabus hasn't changed in the last few decades to account for that real world. So thank you very much.